Starting out on your belly with the legs about as wide as your yoga mat, bending both knees, and just rest the upper body in your folded arms, dropping alternating lower legs in one at a time. Allow for some movement through the hips, just adding some movement for the lower back, a little release in the lower back. And then release the legs extended on the mat. Bring them back in hip distance apart. Place a bend in the left knee. Feel free to stay here with it or to reach back with the left arm, grabbing a hold of the left foot. Stretch in the front of the left hip and the left thigh. And if you like a little deeper stretch, just prop up onto that right elbow. A little bit more intense. If it's a little too intense already, just stay down or don't even worry about grabbing the leg. Release the left leg. Place a bend in the right. Right arm reaches back, grabs the outer edge of the foot. And propping up if you need to feel the stretch in the right hip flexor, right thigh. Release the right leg back to the mat, come back down. And then just propping up onto the elbows for Sphinx pose. Encouraging some curve in the lower lumbar spine and softening through the glutes. Imagine you're pressing your forearms into the mat and pulling your chest forward. Now from your Sphinx pose, scoot your entire body just slightly off to the right. Bring the left lower arm parallel to the top of your mat and roll on that left side, the left hip, stacking your hips, your knees, and your feet. So you're all in one lane for a nice side body stretch down that left side. And propping up onto the hand, you can lift that elbow if you'd like a little more intense stretch in your left side. Try to think of this not quite as a side plank, but just relaxing into a lateral spinal stretch. So no need to engage the core. Roll back onto your belly for shoulder stretch. So fully extending the left arm straight out to the side, away from the video. Slide the right hand closer to your chest. Place a bend in the right knee, rolling on to your left side, crossing the right foot behind your left leg. Pressing into the mat with your right hand and your right foot. Rotating the chest away from the ground for a deeper stretch into that left shoulder, left side of the chest. And go ahead and slowly release back onto the belly. Returning back to your Sphinx pose. And then pressing up to tabletop, aligning hands under shoulders and the knees under the hips. Cat-cow stretch, lifting the chest and the hips on an inhale. Exhale, rounding the spine. Inhale, lifting the chest and hips. Exhale, rounding. Come back to a flat back tabletop. Cross the ankles, start walking the hands back and have a seat in the center of your mat facing forward. Bring the soles of the feet together for butterfly pose, Baddha Konasana. Softening through the hips, hinging forward from the spine. Feel free to grab your block and forward fold, resting your head on the block, placing it on whichever height you prefer, or just resting your head in your hands. Softening across the lower spine and through the hips and the groin. Slowly rounding up. Coming into half frog, swinging the left leg around backwards, bringing the right shin parallel to the front of the mat, and rotating the torso to your right. So both hands are off to the right thigh, Sitting up nice and tall, and then reaching forward away from the body for a sideways child's pose. Nice stretch down the left lower spine. Slowly press back up to a seated upright position. And try to draw the right side of the chest back, fully rotating into the twist, and return back to center. Cradle that left leg around, and then settle the left ankle on top of the right, or even deeper, settling the left shin on top of the right for square pose or fire log pose. Start reaching the arms forward, feeling a pretty deep stretch in the outer left hip. Relax through the neck, folding forward as far as you'd like. Breathing into the pose. Slowly start rounding back up, walking the hands in, and unravel the legs. Do a couple little windshield wipers, and coming into a tabletop, facing the opposite direction than you did the first time. Now widen the knees, bring the toes together, push the hips back into child's pose with extended arms, resting the head either on the mat or a block. Now flipping the palms facing up, bend the elbows and bring the fingertips to the shoulder blades. Feel that nice stretch in the chest and along the backs of the upper arms. Release the arms, reaching toward the top of the mat, and press up towards your tabletop, coming back onto the belly. Widen the legs about the width of your mat. Bend both knees and windshield wiper the lower legs inward. Releasing through the lower back. Release the legs back to the mat. Bring them back in hip distance apart. Bending the right knee and reach the right arm back. Grab a hold of the foot if you'd like. Otherwise, just keep the knee bent. If you need deeper, prop up onto that left elbow. Deep stretch in the front of the right hip, the right thigh. Release the right leg, return back to the mat. Bending the left leg, reach back with the left arm, grab the outer edge of the left foot. Press up onto the elbow if you need a deeper stretch. Stretching into the left thigh, front of the left hip. Release the leg down, come back down to the arms. Pressing up toward the elbows for Sphinx pose. Keeping the chin just slightly dropped, a nice chest and shoulder opening. Soften through the glutes and the legs. Scoot the body toward your left. Bend your right elbow, bringing the right forearm parallel to the top of the mat. Roll onto your right side, facing the video. Be sure to stack the feet, the knees, and the hips. Let the hips relax. Allow that whole right side to feel that side body stretch. For a deeper stretch, lift the right elbow, coming up into it a little higher. Just completely cave in through that side rather than engaging in a side plank. Lower back down onto your side. Coming back to the belly for shoulder stretch. This time reaching your right arm straight out to your right side. Sliding the left hand in closer to your chest. Bend the left knee. Roll onto your right side facing the video. And cross your left leg behind the right. Pushing into the mat with your left hand and your left foot. Opening up through the chest and the shoulder on the right side. Start rolling back onto the belly. pressing up to a tabletop position on the hands and knees for cat-cow stretch. Inhale, lifting. Exhale, rounding. Inhale, lifting the chest and the hips. Exhale, rounding, tucking the spine and hanging the head. Now crossing the ankles, push the hips back and swing the feet forward. Come to the center of your mat, facing front. Grab your block. And coming into butterfly stretch. Bring the soles of the feet together. Let the knees just gently fall open. Don't worry how high up they may be. Start hinging forward from the hips, bringing the chest forward, gazing out beyond your toes. Feel free to use the block, whatever height you'd like to rest the forehead on, whatever allows you to fully relax the neck. Softening across the lower spine and into the hips. Just breathing naturally. Slowly start rounding back up. Swing the right side of your butterfly legs around in reverse. And walk the hands over to your left for a sideways child's pose, reaching the arms out away from the body. Pulling the right hip away from the hands for a stretch down that whole right side. Hang the head, relax the neck, going down as far as you'd like. Walking the hands back in toward the hips. A nice tall rotation. Come back to center. Swing that right leg back around. Give it a little cradle. And then settle the right lower leg on top of the left lower leg. Stacking either shins or even having just the right ankle over the left. Coming into square pose, fire log. Extend the arms as we hinge forward, creating a pretty intense stretch into that right outer hip. Option to stay seated upright, whatever it takes for you to feel the stretch in your right hip. Walking back up and release. Swing the legs around, little windshield wipers. Coming back to tabletop pose, flat back. Bring the left knee just a few inches ahead. Extend the right leg, cross behind the left leg, bending both knees, and separate the feet about as wide as your mat. Walk the hands forward and gently start easing the hips back. Slowly pushing back to a seated position, to shoelace pose. The left knee overlapping on top of the right knee as much as possible and separating the lower legs as far apart as we can for a deeper stretch in the groin and the inner thighs. Begin hinging forward from the hips, bringing the chest forward, staying lengthened, and decompressing the lower spine. Slowly start to round up, breathing into the left hip. Reaching behind the back side and grabbing either opposite fingers or wrist or elbows for an extra chest opener. Hinging forward once again if you like. Notice how the left sits bone is just barely hovering over the mat. To intensify the stretch in the left hip, think about driving that left sits bone downward closer to the mat. Release the bind in the arms and reaching the arms forward, easing out of the pose, coming into tabletop. Widen the knees and send the hips back toward the heels for child's pose. Fully extending the arms forward for that extra stretch in the shoulders. Walking the hands closer together for a deeper stretch down into the muscles of the lats. Open the hands back up. Return back to tabletop. Repeating that stretch on the opposite side now. Bring the right knee a few inches forward, extend the left leg, crossing the left leg behind the right, both knees bent. Start driving the hips back, easing into your shoelace stretch. Eventually bringing the hips all the way down to a seated position, right knee overlapping the left as much as possible, hinging forward for a more intense stretch. This time notice how the right hip is just barely hovering off the mat. Drive the right sits bone down for more intensity through the stretch. If you'd like, add a reach behind. You can interlace all the fingers, lift through the chest, hinge through the hips. And slowly easing out of your pose, releasing the arms. Coming back to tabletop. Detangling the legs and finishing up in our kneeling upright or hero pose. Take a moment to settle in, find your breath, bringing some awareness to how you might be feeling through the hips, the back, the shoulders. Hopefully, after practicing these stretches, you feel like you may have eased some of the tension that we often carry in those areas. Thanks so much for practicing with me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and like or share the video with a friend. We'll see you in the next video. Namaste.